This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so thank you everyone. To those of you that have registered and joined us already this morning. So as I briefly mentioned, my name is Noel. I conduct all the training work for Thermotrack Australia. So the purpose of today is just that, is training. So we'll run through everything on the T3i, some do's and don'ts in relation to using the unit, and where obviously this unit it's relating to how we sort of use it here in Australia. I understand that where you are, there is some serious differences in construction methods and materials, but nonetheless, I'll run you through how to use it, and then any questions that we have throughout, please ask. I just ask that we don't just get question after question. There is, at the end of each section, throughout this session, there is ample time where I'll sort of open it up to questions. So if you do have any questions relating to what we've just spoken about in that section, please fire away, and I shall do my best to answer it all for you. So what I'll do, I'm just going to mute everyone's microphones. That just takes out some of the background noise, not only for myself but for other participants as well. When it comes time for any questions that you may have, please feel free to open your microphone up and ask the question. So without further ado, we shall get underway. Okay, so the Thermotrack T3i, it's a 3-in-1 all sensor unit. There is a radar only model available, not knowing what the participants here today have, so we will talk about all three sensors for those that does have it. So we have a motion sensor built in, so that's detecting movement, obviously, within or beyond building materials. It operates on a microwave type basis, and then it prints out onto an Android-based device a signal. And it's from that signal which we make our determination on the actual movement. There is a thermal sensor built in. So it is similar technology to a thermal imaging camera, although we do not have a thermogram. So it is just an IR thermometer, if you will, and it is surface temperature. And then also there's a moisture sensor on the unit, and it's got two modes. It's got a direct mode and a relative mode as well. So we can use them in differing areas and on different materials as well. So all of these items here that this device does have does come in handy for building inspections, particularly timber pest and termite inspections. In Australia here, we operate in this industry under, and all industries, we operate under what's known as the Australian standards. And there is a specific standard for inspections. It was last updated in 2017. And in that publication that came out, it is listing termite radar units as a specialist tool. So the industry is recognizing that there is more technologically advanced equipment available to us, which is also beneficial and worthwhile to use. So it has suggested in our publication over here that we should have one of these items, and that being a detector animal, thermal imaging camera, and or a termite radar unit. So it is good that industries, particularly Australia, but also probably in your part of the world, different areas of the world that I'm aware of, is starting to embrace newer technology in our battle against particularly termites. Now, as good as the device is, the Thermotrack, it doesn't do the job for us. So most importantly, it's our knowledge, our expertise throughout the inspection process, whether that be your timber sounding, your oblique lighting, looking for visual cues, feeling certain material, using moisture sensors and such. We still need to do that. There's nothing which is going to prevent us from doing that, and it's something we all should be looking at doing as well. It's from there, any extra clues or visuals that we get from that inspection that we're conducting, then we've got the option of using the sensors on the TurboTrack unit as well to do a little bit further investigation prior to having to put any holes in the walls for putting in, for example, boroscopes, or physically seeing what's actually going on behind the building material. So obviously with termites, least disturbance is better. So using the TurboTrack radar unit, the motion sensor, it enables us to get a better picture of what's going on with minimal disturbance as well. So some very basics that we will run through here. For those of you that do have the device and have been using it, this will obviously you'll understand this, but for people that are relatively new to the device, it's all very useful information for you. So the unit itself is powered by regular AA batteries in the kit that you do purchase from TurboTrack. It does come with 10 batteries. They are rechargeable batteries. It takes 5 to run the unit itself. So when we initially install the batteries in the correct manner, the unit itself will go through a self-diagnostic check. And what we notice is the LED lights on the unit, it'll flick through all posts and it'll change colors and so forth. And if everything checks out okay, including battery voltage, all the lights will go off. And that's what we actually want. We want all those lights to go off after that diagnostic process. If that is okay, then we can turn it on, connect the Android. Away we go. If, however, any lights do happen to stay on at that particular moment in time, that it is indicating that there's an issue with the device. It may be in the device itself, or it very well may be flat batteries or low voltage battery, in which case you can just swap out those batteries. So what we do suggest is any lights staying on, do swap the batteries. So if you swap batteries over, run self-diagnostic again, and the lights go off, well, we can put it down to being a flat battery or a faulty battery. You can look at that set you just taken out. But if lights do stay on again with the new set of batteries in there, there is an issue, most likely with the device. So it's a matter of taking note of which post and what color the LED lights are, and then getting in touch with TurboTrack support, and they'll be able to let you know exactly what the issue is and how it can be rectified moving forward. So once it's run through, it's diagnostic, everything's okay, we've turned it on by hitting the power button on the top of the unit. Green light will come on and indicate that it is powered up now. Once we've powered the unit up, we then open the app on our Android device, hit the connect button, it'll automatically Bluetooth pairing should already be established, and it will connect with your T3i that's available. And you'll note that the green light changes to a blue light, and then the app itself screen will go into full color mode. So it's indicating that the unit is turned on, the app is open, and it's ready to work. Each time we use a sensor, there's another light on. We'll always have the blue light on, indicating that it's paired correctly. The Bluetooth is working successfully. When we're using the radar, we will have a green light with the blue. Moisture sensor will have another blue light on, and the thermal sensor will have a red light with the blue light on as well. So that's just a quick indication on your screen when you are using it, that we're knowing that it is all right. So if any of those lights drop out, sometime there is an issue somewhere in it. And then we just need to look into what that issue is. Now, as far as the batteries go, the biggest killer we've noticed of these batteries is actually leaving them in the device itself. There is some internal componentry within the device, excuse me, and it will drain the batteries even if it's not turned on. So if you do leave batteries in circuit, 5 of them in there, what we have found is it will drain the life of those batteries. And if they're left in long term, it can actually damage one or more batteries. So it's not a good idea to leave them in. We do recommend at least removing one battery throughout the day to break that circuit. Personal preference and company standpoint is remove all of the batteries when you're finished using the device. Not only will that prevent premature depletion of those batteries, but also removes any risk of battery leakage per se, corrosion setting in at the terminals depending on your location, coastal or not. And obviously we don't want to damage the unit, so pulling them out, putting them back in your storage case, getting yourself into your charging regime, and you should have many years of trouble-free use with those batteries and all. There is a battery level indicator on the app itself. So on the app itself, we do have the 3 icons here for which sensor to use. And underneath that, we have a symbol which sort of looks like a battery, if you will. It starts out green, it's fully charged, and then it depletes the lines, and then it will change to a yellow. When that happens, you need to replace those batteries. Put another set of batteries into the unit. If that is yellow, with the low collective voltage with the batteries, particularly on the moisture sensor, it will actually tell you that the batteries do need to be changed. But we can run into connection issues as well if you're trying to use with underpowered batteries as well. So look after your kit, keep it in your dustproof case, so forth. Don't throw it around. It is a sensitive electronic device, and do get into a good charging regime or routine with your batteries. Now, as all 10 batteries supplied the kit are all the same, it is recommended mark 5 of your batteries. Put X's on them, 1s, 2s, whatever it may be that works within your company. That way, you know you've got 2 distinct sets of 5 batteries, always using the same 5 batteries together and charging them the same, depleting them, and so forth. This also have noticed over the years that it does seem to extend the life of the batteries, having good maintenance schedule with them. Obviously, charging them up, having them fully charged and so forth is a good thing, particularly when you're using it. The last thing you want is to have flat batteries and not being able to use the device. Now, if you're working within a company that has multiple users sharing a device, you all need to be on the same wavelength, if you will, as far as battery maintenance is concerned. So whether you have a note within the box itself explaining to the employees how you want it to be worked, whose responsibility for charging, storing, and so forth, or simply just writing it on the battery compartment cover to replace all batteries and so forth. That's entirely up to you within your company, but it is a good thing to do. So moving on, talking about the sensors. So the radar sensor, the motion sensor, is picking up movement. It is a highly accurate tool, and it does aid in the confirmation of termites and other insects as well. But there has to be movement in there. So if nothing is moving, it's not going to pick them up. Okay. So as the insects move within the material, and we have the thermotrap positioned correctly, it will pick up that. It will detect that movement. It does operate off a microwave signal emitting from the head of the device. So for obvious reasons, when you do have it turned on, do not go holding it against your body. Don't go looking into the face of the unit as such. It is fairly low emission of microwaves. However, it is still a microwave. We need to err on the side of caution as far as that is concerned. Confirming movement, confirming activity, trying to work out the extent of activity, or prove and disprove activity. So some prime examples of that, you see an area of damage. Our first instinct is to grab a knife or a screwdriver, go into that damaged area, start poking and prodding around and opening it up to see what we can see. Now, as far as termites are concerned, they're not going to hang around for what's going to come next after that. They're disturbed, they're open up, the galleries are open. They don't like that, they're not going to hang around. So obviously termite management does rely on the least disturbance that we can give to a termite colony to allow our treatment procedures to be the most efficacious that we can deliver. So being able to use this device on those damaged areas without having to pull it apart is a very good thing. It's putting us ahead of the game, so to speak. Working out the extent of the activity. Just seeing one area of damage within a wall or a window frame or whatever the situation may be. Obviously, the termites had to get to that point from somewhere. So utilizing the TermaTrack for tracking that extent of activity, finding out where aggregation areas are, possible feeding areas, their highways of movement, for example, and hopefully back to entrance points is what we're trying to achieve. So it certainly does work, and it's certainly beneficial to be doing that. Again, it's non-invasive. It reduces the need to open up walls, window frames. As such, as I just mentioned, less disturbance, better in termite management on it. Now, it doesn't remove the need to open up walls and such, or do an invasive inspection. There is times where we just have to do that to look further, or whether we're treating and so forth. But it's reducing it in the short term. There can be a time frame in between us locating the issue, working out what we're going to do with it, and then giving our clients a pricing structure, and then them agreeing to it. So it can be some time before our initial findings, and then going back to do the actual treatment. So again, we don't want to be opening things up there in that initial stages if we can avoid it. So this device over the years has proved highly beneficial in that sense. Tracking, as I said earlier, termites are in a window, for example. They didn't just show up there, generally speaking. Particularly, obviously, subterranean termites, they're coming out of the soil, come moving up from the ground into the structure. So being able to find those areas is very helpful to what we're trying to achieve. Finding where they came in is even better. That way we can at least have a chance of proper prevention from them coming back in that same area. But all products that we have, and I'm not entirely clear on the products that you have in your countries. In Australia, management products we do have dusts, flowable alpha cellulose type dusts as a fipronil base that are very good. Also have foaming solutions that we can use, mixed up with a few different products available to us there. Fipronils being one, foaming with the imidacloprid is another. Also chlorate of cran illipol is another one. Also baiting, running above ground baiting stations, giving the matrix, the IGR matrix, straight onto termite activity. But now with all of those methods, whether it's dusting, foaming, or baiting, it all works on numbers of termites. The more termites that come in contact with the treatment process, the quicker the demise is going to be about with those termites as well. So only putting a little bit of treatment product into one particular area isn't necessarily going to solve our problem. Particularly with foams as such, you run the risk of chasing them from that particular area, but not eliminating the colony at all. So you may think you've taken care of the situation, but then they pop up somewhere else within the structure down the line. Also baiting, you need to get onto a feeding area. Putting it on a highway or a trafficable area of termites, they may hit that station, they may have a look, start consuming, but actually having a feeding area located, which you certainly can do using this device, increases your chances of an early hit into that station, the termites moving in and consuming the IGR. Obviously, the quicker they consume that IGR within the bait matrix, the quicker it's going to go throughout the colony, make its way back to the queen. And then obviously what we're looking for is colony collapse. So knowing the extent, knowing how they got there or why they're traveling a certain area or way, direction is very good for what we're trying to achieve. And it can be accomplished by using the Termitrack as well. And that also allows for that precise treatment. At the end of the day, products that we have available for us, whether it's in the termite world or the general insect world, cockroaches, spiders, ants, and the like, they all work. They wouldn't have made it through the registration process if they didn't work. But like all termiticides or pesticides, they only work if they've been applied in the correct position. If you don't apply them in the correct position, they're not going to work correctly or to their full effect. And it's going to cost you money. You're going to have to go back, you're going to have to retreat and so forth. So taking the time after the initial finding of termites to then get into tracking of the termites, it goes a long way to that precise treatment process, which in the long term will save you time and it will save you money. Now, as far as positioning of the radar goes, having it flush to the material we're trying to penetrate is always better. It will give us the maximum penetration available for that particular type of material. What we do need to be mindful of, though, is smooth, glossy materials or finished material. We can get emission, the microwave emission can reflect off that type of material. And the more smooth, the more gloss it is, the more reflection we may experience. So we do need to be mindful of that when we do have a position that we don't have anything moving around, not moving hands around, have people moving and so forth. Even curtain blinds or having pot plants nearby moving, that can create some issues. So by reducing that air gap or having it flush is always better. And in the instance of a very smooth, glossy surface, running with a piece of cardboard in between the device and that glossy material will dampen that emission, any emission reflection that we may get. But the positioning of the radar is vital. Again, it's the same as a pesticide or a termiticide. If you don't have it in the right spot, it's not going to achieve the results that you want. So the radar field of view itself, if you look at the bottom face or the head of the unit, it's this lower section here where you can see this red square line drawn. You'll note in there's a circular area with little indents that come out at the 12 o'clock mark, 3 o'clock mark, 6 o'clock mark, and 9 o'clock mark. Now that is the extremities of the field of view. It exits in a square fashion. It does not get larger. The further away the emission has traveled from the unit, it does go out in a straight line. And it is the size of that there. So it is a fairly small field of view. It's roughly 35 square millimeters. But it is an adequate field of view if you have it in the right position. So what can happen is you may place it somewhere and not get a reading, but you know they're there, whether you can see them or smell them or hear them, whatever it may be. You just may need to move the device slightly. So if it's down the low, termites or the activity is below the field, you'll miss it. Above it, side on, and so forth. So sometimes just moving it a few millimeters one way or the other, or changing the angle of it if you are sitting on the ground into the wall. Just changing that angle can mean the difference between picking up on movement or missing it. Now, as far as penetration of material goes, it does vary. It purely comes down to the density of said material that we are trying to penetrate. So here in Australia, the majority of our buildings, domestic type buildings, nowadays in more modern times, they're concrete slab on ground type structures with a timber frame, with a plasterboard internal lining, and then external can either be a brick face or it can be a timber siding, it can be a fibre cement cladding, and so forth. So all of those materials, it certainly will penetrate for us. Now, I do understand in your part of the world that there is a lot more concrete type structures, concrete panels, block construction, and so forth. So look, it certainly will penetrate to a certain degree, but it's not. We're not talking inches of concrete that it's going to travel through at the end of the day. Okay, but bricks, it's a standard clay brick. It'll go sideways through one of those. Concrete blocks, it will enter into the block, but if the block has been filled, so if it's a core filled concrete block, you're not going all the way through there. But with bricks and blocks, termites certainly can utilize mortar joins. Mortar joins are not termite proof. Slight cracks can occur with them from ground settlement or drying and so forth. And termites will utilize that, in particularly concrete blocks that haven't been core filled. They will definitely utilize those areas and can move on. Tiles, marble, granite type materials certainly does penetrate. Those materials are quite porous in itself. So it will penetrate quite easily with that material. We do need to be mindful of that smooth glossiness that we do notice with that type of material. So as I said earlier, we don't want to have any sideway reflection being picked up on us. Particle boards, chipboards, MDFs and the like, so composite board, if you will. Yes, it will penetrate through that type of material. Marine plyboard as such. And you're looking up, you're sort of looking upwards of a couple of inch mark, certainly that it can penetrate through that. Plasterboard, yes, it'll definitely penetrate. Timber with wood. So as we increase density, the specific gravity of timbers going up into the hardwoods, obviously the pore cross-sectional of the pores to distinguish between soft and hardwood, the penetration does get less as we go up in the density. So it's conversely related there. So as density increases, penetration decreases. Right, so as far as our softwoods, and the most common framing timber that we do have where I am is a pine, species of pine. Radiata is the species. And what we've found in that framing timber, it certainly penetrates, and we're looking up to about the 80 millimeter mark, so a little bit over 3 inches of penetration in there. And I say with hardwoods and large slabs of hardwood, that penetration does reduces to about half, down to about 40 millimeters. Okay, but depending on where the material is used, we can go to the other side, changing angles and so forth to try to achieve our results. Obviously, using the device in certain areas, knowing habits of the termite genus and species in your area, also coupling that with your knowledge of construction techniques in your locality is a good thing, and that'll dictate where we're going to need to use the device, if we will, in certain areas. So most commonly for termite entry into structures, it's either directly building tubes up over slab edge and going in, or through cracks in concrete, or joins, construction joins, and so forth of the device. So knowing that, being able to use it in those areas. Now, as far as checking underneath concrete slabs, look, trying to track under concrete is problematic, generally speaking, due to the thickness of the concrete. However, there's not much point in knowing. It's the point of where they've come through that concrete into the structure is what we really need to know. There can be termites traveling underneath the concrete in various locations, but if it is solid concrete, they are not penetrating. They are not going through that concrete. Okay, so it's being able to find those areas of cracks or joins, concrete joins, construction joins, and so forth, is where we really need to utilise it. And then once you find that, where they may have come through, whether it is a crack or a join, I mean, that's the area we're going to be treating anyway to prevent them coming back in. Now, there is two limitations to microwave technology. First limitation is metallic objects. Anything metal, microwaves cannot penetrate. It bounces off the metal. So at that point in time, if we are bouncing off metal that you don't know that's within a material or beyond a material, it can give us a lot of erratic type patterns on our Android screen. So it does come down to knowing our construction, knowing what can or can't be there, but then also interpreting the data correctly to be able to determine whether or not that actually is movement or whether it's metal reflection. The other limitation of microwave technology is moisture. As moisture content increases in material, absorption of the microwave also increases with that. So eventually we get to a point where we achieve essentially total absorption of the microwave emission, and we are not going to get a signal on our Android screen. So that can be problematic at times, but utilizing the moisture sensor on the Thermotrack itself, being able to highlight the extremities of that moisture area is certainly a useful thing to do. Once we've located that moisture containment, if you will, then we can use the radar sensor, the motion sensor, on those extremities or the extreme moisture areas to see if there's any termites traveling in or out of that moisture area. So it can be a handy thing to do. Having the moisture sensor built into the device as well makes it very handy for us. So whilst they are two limitations of the device, we can certainly work around it with the other sensors on the device as well. So on the screen of the Android, when we are using the radar, you'll note a few things here. The upper section, there's two boxes. We have a radar section, which is the upper part. Shake is the lower part. Shake is purely an accelerometer of sorts, which detects excess movement of the unit itself. So if you are hand holding it, and you do have something within the shake section, the grid pattern here, you do need to reposition the device. So we don't want anything in that shake section. We only want to get patterns in this radar section. So the grid here, where we do have the line wave or the sine wave, if you will, it's the last 10 seconds of movement. Travels from the right side to the left. So that helps us break down time frames. Also, it gives us an indication on the activity levels that we're actually dealing with in that particular area. And then we have instantaneous movement. So as we do have motion crossing the field of view, that's bar graph, we do get a blue flash going in and out. of here. So that is what we want. We want it in here, but nothing in this shake section. So it does have a gain level on the device as well. Now that gain level goes from 1 to 8, to 10, sorry. It's depicting here being on gain level 8. Now there is no rule of thumb on which gain level that we actually want to be on. That is going to be situation dependent. Okay, so we recommend sort of starting off on 5 and or 6. If you're predominantly using using a device on concrete areas and so forth, you may need to increase that gain level up to sort of 8 or more. But you need to move it up and down as required for each situation. Now, if you are using the device and it's going to be on gain levels 8, 9, or 10, it can be problematic to hold steady with your hand. The device is quite sensitive in that respect. So if that's the case, we recommend using it on a solid platform. So there are tripods available, monopods available for an extension, or use whatever's at your disposal, using a chair, a table, the box it comes in, and so forth. As long as you can get the device to where it needs to be, that's the object of the game. So touching a bit more onto the radar gain control, it does not increase the microwave output. The emission remains the same throughout use of the device. The gain control, the gain function, that's purely amplifying what's on our screen. So consider it a volume button, if you will. So if we look at these diagrams here or depictions, we're going from gain 3 to gain 6 to gain 9. You'll notice how that pattern has increased as it goes across. So it's all about turning that volume to a level where it's suitable for you to identify or interpret that data successfully. We're all different in our focus and what we're looking at. The same as all of us, probably a little bit different in the way we have our volume set on our radios or TVs and so forth. So find out where the sweet spot is for you, and then roll with that setting. This little video here is just showing examples of how the gain setting does work. Test bit of timber, turn track setup. So we do have some artificial movement just off screen on the left. That remains at a constant distance from our test timber and also moving at a constant speed. You'll then notice a person's hand come over and adjust the gain level. When that happens, take note of what's happening on the radar screen, if you will. Okay, so hopefully you could see there what was going on by moving the gain function and then rolling across our screen, getting larger and or smaller, depending on which way it was moved. As I said earlier, the higher you do go on the gain, the more likely you will need to have it on a platform or a device to hold it steady. Some of those items available, monopods and also tripods. So tripod, it has a detachable head, which just goes on. You'll note above on your unit, just above the battery compartment lid. You will notice on there is a threaded insert, so the detachable head from the tripod and also the monopod just attaches onto that threaded insert. It's from that then that you then move your tripod to the position you need to. So they are available through Termatrack. The tripods extend to about 3 meters, roughly 3 meters. They're very useful for getting up to those higher out of reach type areas. The monopods, these devices are more of a positioning tool. They do extend about 1.22 meters. With that, it's not a device where you're going to be holding it, extending it out and then reaching out with it, because you will end up putting movement into it. You will not be able to hold it steady enough. So it is a positioning tool. So extend it to where it could be. You can note here on this middle picture, it does have some stability feet, which can be screwed onto it, and then you can move it up and down. But also this bottom left picture is indicating inside a roof space of a home. Needed to get right out to the far edge, and as you can see the way the pitch of the roof comes down, it was very problematic in safely reaching that area. It was a 2-story home, so I wasn't going to be removing tiles from the roof at that point. So extending it out, it was able to get to where it needed to be, and I was back more comfortable within the roof space at that particular time. There's also a built-in flip stand. You'll see on the Termatrack, and that allows the device to be sitting at a 45-degree angle against walls. So that's just another way of changing that angle when you're positioning it as well. But use whatever's available to get it to where it needs to be. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. As long as the device isn't moving, it'll certainly work okay. Okay, so what we do need to understand is that it is only data that we're being supplied. And it's with that data that we need to interpret correctly the type of movement that is going on. So there are some subtle clues or cues within the data which we need to examine a bit closer. The advantage that we do have with this is subterranean termites in particular are very habitual the way they operate. They're very, very similar across the board, not only physically, but their reactions as well. Living in close society, they're a very touchy-feely creature. The one behind is feeling the one in front, and so forth and so forth. They're side-by-side walkers, some species or genus. So very touchy. So with all that involved, we have noticed that there are certain things within patterns, the data that we're getting, which we can break down to help with our determination. So what we're going to do here, we'll look on the left pattern. This is a pattern of a Coptotermes species. It's Coptotermes aciniformis, very similar to Coptotermes gastroi and formosinus. Very, very closely related, obviously the same genus. So the patterns that you may see on those other species that I just mentioned will be similar here, but all termites themselves. So what we're going to do, we're going to break it down to start with, and I'll try and point out some of these subtle cues that we do see. So we'll start here where my cursor is on the second grid from the right, over to the third grid from the left. Now I've picked those positions in particular to look at because of the spikes. So in between those larger spikes, we'll talk about those spiky bits in a little while. First thing that we note with termites, there is quite a consistency in their patterns themselves, and that's, you know, across the species and genus level as well of termites. It may not look consistent, but it certainly is now when we start breaking it down. What we'll note here on the peaks of the patterns here you'll note that they're not perfectly sharp or perfectly triangular. We notice that there is little step downs that happen in there. Now we put that down to the characteristic type walking that termites have, their locomotion, and again across the board of termites is very, very similar. The way they waddle their head, traveling along as well, it gives us this indication. Then we'll go down to the valleys, if you will, and what we'll note, it's almost identical to what the peak is. So you can almost turn this section here upside down and the pattern will look almost identical. Now that's the consistency that I'm referring to as far as termites, patterns and data is concerned. And that is very, very common. Whilst each section is not exactly the same, you can break it down into an area of a valley and then a peak. Because this data is moving from the right to the left, in this area, for example, we're going to have the valley first and then the peak. So the valley is indicating we've got termites within or movement within the field of view. Then we get a slight break in that movement. And within that slight break of movement, it gives us a spike. And then the next creature's inside and it goes to bring the pattern back down. So I did mention earlier about moisture is an absorbent, or it absorbs the microwave energy, and that's exactly what the creatures are doing themselves. The more numbers of termites, they will actually absorb a certain amount within their bodies, and that's helpful for us with the data. So the spikes are actually the break in moisture within the creatures is what we're getting the movement from. If there was zero movement and it was just wall-to-wall termites in that field of view and they weren't moving, it would be a flat line because the moisture then is overriding any of the movement. But we need to get a break into that and then that'll give us a spike. So if we look at those moving along, moving to our right, if we look at one section, flip it up and then look at the next section, you'll start to see how that does become consistent with the valley moving into the peak. So if we look at this one here, where my cursor is, for example, the fifth grid pattern over in the valley, then you look at the next peak, it's almost identical. And so forth and so forth. As we go along, you'll notice that happening here. There as well, this section here, we flip that up, it becomes this area here. This valley here certainly clearly becomes that peak there. So that is very consistent of termite data, and that's what I'm actually looking for when I am using the device. I have been saying it's quite unique to termites in that sense. Quite often we're getting asked about ants. Yes, it will pick up ants. What do the patterns look like with ants? Well, ants differ wildly across the board. Depends what type of ant, and it even depends on where the ants are actually located as to their type of movement. But what we do know is ants have a harder exoskeleton than what termites have, so you don't get as much absorption of the microwave energy into the ant bodies. We get a lot more absorption in termite bodies. So with ants, you get more of a very peaked, a very triangular type peaks and valleys. You don't get those little step downs in the peaks as such, is what we we're just describing before. So that's another good indicator for differentiating between ants and termites. Also, these spikes here, what that's relating to is higher aggregation. There's more numbers or moving numbers within the field of view at that particular time. So those spikes actually do tell us a story as well. At certain times through highways, it could just be the excess, the soldiers traveling along with the workers, so it's created a larger number or further more in that area, if you will. But it can also, if you're continually getting the large spikes, it can also be indicating that you've hit an aggregation area or a feeding area of termites. And that's a good thing. We need to know those things as we're using it. So we can certainly see that going on with all the pattern. Now, Another thing that I do to help me with my identification along the way is I manipulate the data. By manipulating the data, I'm actually manipulating a response from the termites. As we know, termites are a fairly shy and defenseless type creature. So they do rely on a lot of things to keep them out of harm's way. They live in a closed society, for one. They're a very soft-footed creature, which aids in their detection to natural predators. Also enables them to pick up any excess vibration in their working area, which they can identify as being heavier than their colony members' footsteps, being fairly soft. All termites, even dampwood and drywood termites, not just subterranean, will react to outside influence. And that can be as simple as tapping around an area that you're using the termite trap. When you tap around an area and where those termites are, it will trigger a response from them. Now, different genus respond different ways, but you will get a response. Some genus, primarily, the soldiers will shake and vibrate their body, sending that vibration frequency through the workings, and that's alerting the colony members what needs to happen. Whether it's potential danger, so more soldiers come to that area to block any possible breaches, preventing workers from coming there. Obviously, the sole job of soldiers is to protect the workers, sacrifice soldiers for the sake of the many, which are the lifeblood of the colony. So you will get a response. It's as simple as a tap, 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 knock, 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 knock around that area, and then we watch the screen to see what happens. If it is termites, you will see a notable difference happening on that screen. It'll be an increase in activity, i.e. we will get more spikes, more movement temporarily, and then we may see that pattern fall all the way off as we go. And then it may come back into line as the termites work out it was a false alarm. But all of that is good information for us, particularly if we're looking at it on the screen itself. Okay, so that's a very good thing. What it can also do for us is rule out certain scenarios. It can rule out ant activity. Ants in a void or within material, if you will, they tend not to worry about excess vibration or movement around their area. They're just going about their business, doing what they got to do. Right, so excess movement or noise doesn't necessarily upset the ants, and very rarely does. Changing their atmospheric pressure certainly gets them to move, i.e. blowing onto them or putting a screwdriver into an area where they may be. Yes, then they will come out and make movement en masse. But in a closed environment, tapping above them does not tend to bother them much. Also doing this little test or technique, it can also help in moving out any mechanical vibrationary patterns which we may experience from time to time. What we can get vibration within a pattern on the screen of our Android can be as simple as an air conditioning unit, the mechanical hum or the vibration going through material. It can be a washing machine. It can be a fridge motor cutting in, a computer tower, and so forth. Ceiling fans. Any of that type of mechanical device which does have a vibration from its motor or fans and such, that can travel through the material, and our ThermoTrack can register some very faint patterns on our screen. And you may think it is termites or metal reflection even. But doing that tap around, those mechanical objects do not change. They don't go, oh, well, there's a termite inspector that's tapping on the wall, so we'll just be quiet. It doesn't work like that. So we can, through that process of elimination, lead us closer to termites and further away from any possible mechanical vibration as such. So all of those techniques as one certainly helps us achieve our desired objective, and that is correct identification or interpretation of that particular data. Now, drywood termites, this pattern here is Cryptotermi brevis, the West Indian drywood termite. Now, they are fairly widespread. I'm not sure whether you have them in your country or not. But very, very similar patterns again. They are a lot smaller colony, as we know, as in relation to subterraneans. They don't use fecal matter or mudding to build up galleries and so forth. They have open galleries, working area. But again, they're very soft, very slow-moving creature. They're quite lazy in a sense, if you will. So at times you do have to increase the gain function with drywood termites, but the patterns themselves are very, very similar. Again, slight differences to subterraneans purely due to the numbers that we do get from subterranean. But if we break down the pattern itself, we can start to see the similarities as we're moving along between the peaks and the valleys. And again, that's a good thing. Yes, we can manipulate the drywood termites as well by scratching on the surface or slight tappings to get them to react and move, which then is going to signal in on our data screen. So I'll just share this little video here. Now, this is a typical home in Australia. It is a brick external, timber frame, and then plasterboard walls, which is very, very common, sitting on a slab on ground home. Now, this particular building itself did have active termites within the structure. So I was using the Termitrack to find the full extent of them before I got into the treatment phase of them. Okay, so now we're back in a different section of the home. Now, I highlighted this area this morning. It actually was highlighted this area by a very clever little dog. So come back to this area of the radar, first up. Now you can see I've got marks looking up here. So I spent a little time this morning. All these marks have indicated activity. So there's a double stud in here behind the door frame. So I've indicated that. Now if we look at the pattern here, it's a lot more intensity than what we were actually getting previously in that other section where the moisture. Now I'm just going to move it up a couple of these other marks, which I knew I had this morning. I'll come up a bit higher now, put on the same mark. And I'll just hold that there, nice and steady. I'll stop talking for the moment and we'll look at the pattern. Right, so that instance, we need to turn that pattern down. I'll drop that down to 6 even. Very healthy. But what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to move it sideways off that area. So see now what's happening is that's going down to a flat line. The reason I've done that is to rule out if there's any shaking with me, creating vibration to give us a pattern. And there's a little bit there now for me talking. If I'm not talking, you see that's coming back flat. I go back to our mark. And there we go, getting that heavy intensity again. All right, so hopefully that's a brief explanation for you and you understand exactly what we're trying to do with moisture areas, then checking in for termite activity leading to moisture, but also our series of marks. So each of these marks are stepping stones, and that's showing me, we go all the way up here, I've got up to this point here. Now there is another room adjacent to this entrance where we are getting activity, quite heavy activity. So what I'm going to try to do now is work out where have they entered this structure Once I've done this process, then we'll work out the best way to treat it. All right, okay, it's next time. Have a good day, everyone. Okay, so hopefully you could see there what I was trying to achieve. And it is a process that we do have to run through there, but having a piece of chalk or a pencil with you to enable you to mark those areas gently, and using it as a stepping stone as you are tracking them along that area. The technique I was using there to sort of rule out whether or not it was your vibration or shaking, which may have been giving a pattern or not, just move it to a random area as such. And as we could see there, where I did have it on activity, it was moving, but then when I moved it slightly away from that area, then it went to a flat line. So that showed me straight away that it wasn't me or there wasn't anything else creating a vibration in that area as well. So a few little techniques as you're using it certainly goes a long way for your interpretation. But the more you do use the device, the more comfortable you get holding it, handling it, using it, and also interpreting that particular data as well. Okay. All right, so that's the radar section of our training today. Is there any questions that has arisen from what we've discussed so far? So if you do have questions, feel free that you can turn your microphone on and ask away, or you can use the chat function, whichever may be easier for you. Okay, doesn't seem like we have any questions. That's fine. Hopefully that means I've been explaining it adequately for you. Okay, so we'll move on to moisture. So moisture is a very important component of inspections for timber pests and termites. Particular moisture at the end of the day is the root of all evil as far as buildings are concerned, not only for insect activity or termite ingress and activity, but also ground movement, settlement, and so forth, which can create cracking, excess movement of the structure itself. Timbered areas also can lead to premature decay of those timbered areas as well. So knowing where moisture is, even without seeing any outward signs, testing for moisture, getting an indication of the moisture content of the material within the structure is a very good thing to do. As I say, yes, it's conduciveness to termites, as moisture is the attractant to termites. Food is just usually the goal, or timber is the food goal after the moisture has attracted them to a particular area. So being able to do that is a very good thing. In Australia, it is part of our standards for inspections that we do have to test the structure inspecting for moisture. All right, it's up to our discretion which areas we test. Obviously, our wet areas standard, so laundries or bathrooms, kitchen areas where taps and so forth are. Obviously, there are predominant wet areas, but also external walls around window openings and such. Are very common areas for moisture ingress. So testing around those areas is good. So having an accurate moisture sensor is paramount to what we're trying to achieve. And there are a lot of meters out there, sensors on the market out there, but I believe the ThermoTrack, as far as a non-invasive style moisture sensor goes, is a very accurate piece of equipment. So we'll run through this section and it'll explain explain how to use it, where we can use it, and so forth. So opening up the moisture is hitting the raindrop icon. That will get us open. Also, but bear in mind, the battery symbol here must be green. If it is yellow, you need to replace those batteries, and it will tell you if you go to open it that the batteries are low. When it opens, it does have two functions. We've got a dual mode, a relative mode, and a direct mode. All right, so we're using those in different areas on different material. Very simple to switch between the two modes as well. So the direct moisture sensor, it's reading any slight increase or decrease of moisture content within building materials. Primarily what we're using it for, in this sense on the direct, is timber products or timber byproducts, if you will. We're not going to be using the direct meter on concrete materials or brick and so forth. The composition of that material, you don't get a highly accurate reading on the direct. We'd use a relative reading on that. The direct, it displays in a percentage. Then we can set up alarms to go off at whatever percentage that your concern is in your particular area, dependent on wood, dependent on climate. So there is a thing called, or known as the EMC of timber, the equilibrium moisture content. All timber has moisture in it, whether it's the living tree or whether it's timber in service. It all has moisture in it. It's a living, breathing creature, if you will. So periods of humidity or rain, more moisture in the air, that timber will absorb moisture into it, even if it's not sitting in the ground. Just by the nature of timber, it will do that. So we need to understand in our location, wherever that is, the type of timber you're using, softwood, hardwoods as such, and what is the equilibrium moisture content allowable in your location. Okay, so that varies greatly depending on your location. For example, where I am on the east coast of Australia, the equilibrium moisture content of framing timbers here in buildings is roughly 12%. And that'll vary fractionally up, below or above that 12% figure, depending on extended dry periods or heat or extended rain periods. But we need to understand that relationship for us to be able to understand the type of moisture that becomes a problem. Obviously, with prolonged moisture above a certain level in timber as well, it is going to promote fungal decay. And generally what we're looking at there is anything above 20, consistently above 20%. So on average across the species, it's generally around the 22% to 23% mark, where you're going to have enough moisture present for fungal spore propagation, growth, and so forth. Hence, fungal decay setting in. And as we know, fungal decay is highly palatable to termites, particularly subterranean termites, and then into moving into dampwood termites, of course, as well. And that's primarily their diet at the end of that, and that's what they do in nature. So we need to be able to see within the structure to prevent that or catch the early warning signs of that happening. The relative mode. So it's displaying a difference in moisture from a particular start point that we reference, and then any change above or below that from the reference point, it will show us on a easy to read bar graph type scenario. So this type of, or this mode of the moisture sensor is where we're going to be using on concrete block, brick, concrete slabs. We can use it successfully on those types of materials. Whereas the direct, sensor is not going to be so accurate on those types of materials. When the moisture sensor actually opens up, it runs into a self-calibration process, if you will. So the moisture pad itself, which is on the upright face, back face of the device, where that symbol T3I is, that needs to be open to air. You can't have it resting on material, you can't hold your hand on it. And it's actually reading the ambient moisture content. And it does make some minute changes within itself to give us more accurate readings as we are using the device. Now, if there is excess moisture detected at that point, i.e. either from holding it incorrectly or having it flat on the material, for example, or even if it's a very, very large humidity in that particular area you're in, it will sound an alarm. It'll tell you there's been interference detected. You need to exit that sensor and then reopen it after repositioning it. If you are continually in an area with high humidity on it, and that continually happens, there are some adjustments that the tech department here at ThermoTrack can make to your device to compensate for that as well. So the technology itself. Okay, so what I've got here on the screen is a direct comparison to another popular moisture sensor around the world, which is known as the Tremex Encounter Plus. Now, I'm not sure whether you use that in your part of the world, but it's very, very common here in Australia. I do know in America, also in Europe, it's a very common device to be used for moisture sensing. And both of these devices, the Tremex and the ThermoTrack, they both fall under the same group of technology, which is a non-invasive dielectric moisture sensor. So the non-invasive means we're just sitting on the material surface. We don't have probes, which we're sticking into the material. It's just non-invasively on the top. Dielectric is there is an electrical current output from the device, and it's from measured resistance changes or values that will give us a reading per se. So how they actually differ though between these two devices, how the readings are made and how that electrical current actually works. So on the Tremex device, it operates on an arc of conductivity. So you can see on this diagram those two blue lines traveling. So that's an arc, transmitter pad, receiver pad. So there's two black pads on the back of the Tremex if you're not familiar with it. Both of those pads need to be on the same position at the same time with the same material. And the conductance exits transmitter pad through material into receiver, and it continually operates in an arc-like fashion. And it's from that arc-like fashion that it registers changes, and then from those changes it makes the needle on the gauge move. With the ThermoTrack, however, it's a capacitance type technology, if you will, so method of stored energy, and it's continually moving in and out of the device in a straight line from the sensor. So that having that type of technology over the conductance style, what that's actually doing is allowing deeper penetration, and it gives us a bit more accurate results, purely because it's not operating in an arc. It's not going across two different areas of a surface. It is pinpointing it in and out of that area. So there is some differences within the device itself. Also, Tremex is analog, ThermoTrack is digital. So Tremex, you cannot slide it across the material. It needs to be placed at every interval that you need it to be. Whereas the ThermoTrack being digital, it can be slid across the material. Excuse me, and still get an accurate result. Depth penetration of the ThermoTrack we found up to 60 millimeters. And that's going through plasterboard and timber, pine radiator framing timber. I'll just show this little promotional video here, but it'll give you a good indication on how you can use it and where it can be used. And so you probably noticed there the monopod was being used on the TurboTrack, doing moisture. The monopod is very, very helpful. Because we can slide across material, the monopod helps us keep our body position where it needs to be. So standing upright, walking along, sliding across the material, as opposed to having to bend over, kneel down all the time, and move along, placing, for example, the Tremex. Also getting up to higher areas without having to get a ladder. We can certainly extend the monopod and be able to get up to higher out of the reach areas. So it is going to enable you to get a little bit more coverage throughout a structure with ease, quite safely and easy on your body. All right, so identifying differences in moisture in the majority of surfaces, but except for the ones that I've mentioned earlier with the direct, it is very, very good. Humidity, it is designed to measure moisture in extreme humidity because it does do the self-calibration. And also there are some other minute adjustments which tech department can make to suit your location if needed. Penetration, it is more than double than the Tremex unit itself, and is very, very accurate. Obviously instantaneous results, as I mentioned, being able to slide it, and in conjunction with the monopod, very, very handy addition to your kit. And also having the alarms set up, so you don't have to look at the screen if you don't want to. You can set those alarms up through the option function. And then, as I said, 3 different levels of the alarm at percentages which you're concerned of, and going through that will give us those sounds. So then you're not looking at the screen, you're hearing the sounds. Now, those sounds can be turned on or off, depending on what you do prefer. So the relative. Now the Tremex unit as well, it does have relative readings. They just call it or term it comparative. But it doesn't give a set level. It'll continually change and you need to keep cross-referencing it back to it. Whereas with the TurboTrack in the relative mode, once we place it on a material, we can reference it to that moisture value. And then when we move it along the same type of material in a different area, along the wall or a different section of the wall or flooring, it's going to tell us whether there's higher or lower moisture from that reference point. If we have blue on the screen after reference, that means we've moved to more moisture in an area. If we have red, that means we've moved to less moisture in that particular area. Tapping on the white of the screen is what's going to give us our reference or our start point. Again, penetration is the same as when we're using it on direct. And also taking into account the humidity of the time, heat and so forth. It's all factored in when we reference it. So each time you go to a new material or a new area or a new building, you need to reference it to that particular area. And it's from that point on that you're getting your results. So I'll just show you a series of little videos here. It's just showing, again, in a quite a common home here in Australia, plasterboard on timber framing. How we go about it on an inspection if you do find a moisture area, then being able to utilise the relative mode plus also the radar sensor as well. So first thing we've got to do is we're going to double check our moisture area. Radar doesn't work on high moisture because it gets absorbed. So we need to highlight and pinpoint the extremities of that moisture to enable us to use the radar. So we'll just go ahead and do that now. So what we're going to do, we'll just show you here when we turn on the moisture sensor what happens. And this is an important thing to do. Always stand the unit up. Sensor area needs to be open. So as we open the moisture here, you'll see what it's doing is running through its calibration process. It is a bit of a humid day today. There's been some rain around. So what's happening is it's going to factor that into the equation. So now we're open. So I'm just going to run it across the wall over here. And we'll see what sort of figures we're getting. So just down low. So that's not an unusual sort of a figure for where I'm located and time of year. Now we're starting to climb up. What I'm going to do is just roughly in this area where it is altering, just got a general, just a little pencil mark on the wall. So I'm still going along. See, that's elevated moisture. Now we're just starting to break off. So just generally speaking, close area, just another pencil mark. So what we have to do now, we need to flick over to the relative meter. So to do that, direct moisture on or off. We're now on relative. So this is what we're going to use to pinpoint the extremities of the moist area. So all I'm going to do is roughly go back to the center of my wall where I had that moisture. I will now hold that on the wall. Over on anywhere in this white box, I've now referenced it to that wall area's moisture, my moisture, humidity of the day and so forth. So now I'm just sliding along the wall. You can see now red's coming out, red's peaked. So that's telling me I'm to the least amount of moisture along this area in comparison to where I referenced it. So now I'm just going to come back, sliding back towards where I referenced it. Now just on the screen there, we see that red's just disappeared. That now has become the exact extremities of the moisture. I'm going to use that central to where my sensor is and mark the wall. So over on the wall here, you can just see this mark here. That was our extremities this way. This mark here is our height. So along here, roughly the site slightly changes. The extremities there, it is quite high now. That is above the bottom plate. So it is indicating that there is quite a bit of moisture, more than likely to the ensuite shower that is leaking. But we're going to investigate, because as we know, moisture is highly conducive to termites. They generally won't be in that high amount of moisture. However, we'll come towards it as a condition and usually on the fringes. So what we're going to do now, we need to get onto the radar and check for any action, motion travelling to and for that area. Okay, so hopefully you could see there clearly how easy it is to set up the moisture sensor for use. And don't forget, each time you do set it up, you need to do that at a new building, if it's a new time of day, or even sometimes a new section of the building that you're actually in. So we just got a follow-up one to that now. So we'll just show you that one. Okay, so now here again, this is our wall where we checked out the extremities of the moisture. These marks. So what I want to do now is put the radar here. I want to check along this area to see if we're getting any activity of termites travelling towards this moisture source. As we know, it's very, very common to exploit that. So you see here, That's my extremities. So I'm just going to start over to the edge. I'm going to run it on the flip stand. So at that angle, what I'm doing with the emission, the motion, that's going to get down to the leading edge of the bottom plate, sort of down to the bottom. So just let that sit there. I'll move back. And it is showing a little bit of a pattern. What I'm going to do now, you'll hear this. So you'll see that's intensified from me tapping. And we'll sit back and we'll watch what happens to our pattern. So what's happened, you'll see from where we're hitting it, it's disappeared. Now the pattern has changed a little bit to when we initially put it there. So that's a good indicator. The termites are there. So what I'm going to do, this position, just pencil. That's indicating I'm on the 45. So now I'll just move it along random areas, okay, but on along the same plane. So we'll just move the screen up a bit closer. So I have gone about 12 inches or so here. Make sure we're all still. Again, we're getting a little bit of a pattern. So I'll give them a bit of a... So that was me. Now here, we can see those termites, or the movement has certainly intensified that wee bit. Very strong indicator of termites again, going through there. So I'll just do one more spot. Oh, I better mark that, sorry. Just faint pencil. Come back along here, same sort of distance again. And that's indicating, so it's worth investigating a bit further. Come right back down to the corner. You'll see here actually now in this corner, that pattern is a lot more. So that isn't, again, a very good indicator. They're traveling along the external wall, and then they've highlighted this moisture zone, and they're probably coming in, traveling in on small numbers to start with, to investigate. Okay, so that's how we do it. So utilising the radar and the moisture sensor all together, using both sensors of the moisture sensor, both modes, if you will, to give us the results. So obviously, depending on your construction, as I said, my belief is you do have a lot more concrete as such. Things are going to be slightly different in that respect. Chance of having termites within the concrete itself is going to be very, very slim. But they do only need 0.4 of a millimetre crack for termites to be able to travel through. So if we do have them in timber window frame within concrete paneling or block structure, obviously being able to work out which particular area is the worst as far as aggregation is concerned, and hopefully pinpointing where that entrance point is and then traveling from there. The relative meter does work very, very good on concrete, also block walls and so forth. So you can get a lot of information out of utilizing that. Okay, so that's run us through a radar and moisture sensor, and also the basics of battery maintenance and starter. So do we have any questions in relation to what we've just been watching? Nope. Okay, we shall move on. Thermal sensor. Okay, so the third sensor on the device that we will talk through. So the thermal sensor itself, so essentially it is an infrared thermometer. Okay, so it similar technology to a thermal image camera, or same technology actually, but it's in the results. How they're displayed to us is different. So infrared thermometer as opposed to a thermal image camera. Thermal image camera just has a whole lot more pixels involved, and it's reading more than one spot. So hence, then it's all collated together into a thermogram. All right, but unless you understand how to read that thermogram correctly, you can make the wrong determinations. With this, there's little to no chance of misinterpreting the information. It's giving us a temperature reading. It is a relative thermal sensor. So like the relative moisture sensor, we give it a reference point or a start point, and it's from that, as we move it along, it tells us one way or the other, and it gives it to us in a numerical value. So you can't go wrong with that as such. So with thermal technology, whether it's a IR thermometer or camera, thermal camera, it is only surface temperature changes only. There's no penetration involved. It's not X-ray vision. It is not going beneath the surface or beyond that surface of the material. It is only surface temperature. We're not looking for hot spots. We're not looking for heat areas. We're actually looking for temperature differentials. We're looking for changes in temperature. If we do select or detect a change in temperature to the material, we then need to determine what has created that. But at least it's told us that there is an area of concern, and we can investigate further. We have the moisture sensor and the radar sensor on this device, which we can use straight away. A couple of taps of the button, we're on a different sensor, and we can get different results, if you will. So how it works, we point the laser guide, so there is a red dot that comes out on the face of the screen. Obvious reasons, don't point that at anyone's eyes or yourself looking into it. Beside that dot on the material, on the surface of the material, then we reference it, and then as we move it, red will come out on the screen if we move to a higher heat, and then the numerical positive will be there, or moving on to lower heat, blue will come out, or less heat on the surface. Okay, so very easy to use, very easy to get started. So as I was saying, with thermography, it's a whole lot of spots that are being registered all at once. So it can give a broader area, if you will, but you need to understand the data that you're looking at. You need to understand what that thermogram is and the relationship of what's going on. So a picture can tell 1,000 words, or give us 1,000 words, but the numerical value leaves little to no room for misinterpretation. That's the big difference. So very, very easy. And the ability to be able to select your own reference point. All right. So keeping it at that base level does make it very easy to utilize and understand and not fall short with misinterpretations. So we do need to be mindful of the differences. All these devices do have a place in our industry, but it's understanding how they work and what you're trying to achieve with that device as well, which is a big thing. So distance to spot ratio. So that distance to spot, what that is telling us is if you're a certain distance from the material, it's going to tell us how much of an area you're actually reading. With thermal cameras, that varies. That varies on a lot of things through the specifications of the particular camera of itself. On the ThermoTrap, because it is an IR thermometer as such, we have a basic distance to spot, and it's a 12:1 ratio. So for example, if we're 12 centimeters from material, it's going to be reading a 1 centimeter diameter. 12 inches, if you will, it'll be a 1 inch diameter. If you're 12 meters, it'll be reading a meter in that area. So as further away you go from the material, the larger the viewing area actually gets or becomes. And it gives us the average temperature within that reading area. Okay, so you can see here on this diagram, further away that it is, the larger the reading area becomes. Now, unlike thermal image camera, IR thermometers such as this, the thermal sensor, we only have an instantaneous field of view. Right, thermal image cameras as another field of view beyond, and that's where it's ready to shrink all the other pixelation as far as temperature is concerned as well, and that it puts all of that information together and prints out in front of us on the screen as far as a thermogram is concerned. All right. So there are gain settings available on the thermal sensor here as well, but essentially all we're doing with that is altering the surface area range. So it's governing the sensitivity. Now, it does not really matter what range you have that gain setting on, because it's still giving us a numerical value if there is any changes. It's going to govern how much red or blue comes out, but the numerical value is always going to remain the same. It'll give you a true and accurate figure to rely on in that sense. So like the relative moisture meter, if you go to a different material, you need to reference it. If you go to a different area of the structure, different time of day, different temperature, ambient temperature, humidity, and so all affects what surface temperatures can be. So we need to give it a we need to give it a new reference as such each time we go to use it. So if you're traveling in your truck with it and you pull into a house, you don't just point it at the wall and start reading it. You need to reference it to that particular area, and then you can keep moving on. So very simple, very easy to use. It does get utilized quite a bit throughout the industry in various ways along the area. But those items that we mentioned, you do need to understand. We're not looking for heat, we're not looking for hot spots, we're looking for differences in the temperature. We're not penetrating the material in any way. It is only surface temperature and surface temperature only. Big advantage of it, we do have the other sensors incorporated with the ThermoTrack to deliver us the results that we need by encompassing all the sensors if we need to at that particular time. So as you see, there's not a lot in the thermal sensor as such, but we understand how to turn it on, the distance we're reading at any particular time as we go along, using it horizontal to the material. So what that means is if you reference it at, say, a meter away from the building material, you need to keep moving it with it a meter away. So you keep parallel to that material, whether it's moving vertically or horizontally. As such, you do not angle it down the wall. So very simple to use. All right, so do we have any questions in relating to the thermal sensor? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay. All right, so you can also generate reports from the use of the ThermoTrack device itself. So this is done through the online portal, if you will. So the cloud account. In your device, any data that you do save gets saved to your device. If you have cell phone connection to your device, it automatically uploads the cloud for your account. That can be set up if it hasn't been already. Just email support at ThermoTrack, and they certainly can set up your free cloud account. It's within that online account or cloud service that you can access any data that you've saved, and it's from there that you can print out or email, add pictures and so forth to a supplementary report. So that report can be over and above what you're giving now as a standard report material, or you can add it as an addition to it. It's not recommended as a standalone, particularly where I am. Not sure of the legalities in your country, but it is a supplementary test report, if you will, to accompany what you've just been doing. All right, so just to wrap things up here. Obviously, with termite management, we need to understand quite a few things. Obviously, our knowledge and experience of our subject matter, so termites themselves, particularly termites in our local area or in our region, even within species or genus in different parts of the globe or different areas, there can be slight variations to them, how they react and so forth, depending on their availability of foods, moisture content, and the like. So understanding that in your particular area is a big thing. Know your property, know the construction. What's it constructed of? What are the piers? What is generally the moisture content of timbers, humidity values, and so forth in your area? But wherever we are, we should always start off doing the basics on a visual inspection. Timber sounding, for example, running the moisture meters along certain areas. It's from that if we pick up any clues or cues, then we've got the TurboTrack with us. We can flick on to whatever sensor we need to at that particular time, and to give us any results that we're trying to work out. Obviously, if you do detect activity with or without the TurboTrack, or confirmed it with the TurboTrack, then obviously further investigation will be required to ascertain the full extent of the activity. And that's where you get into the tracking procedures using the moisture and so forth on there. Okay, document everything as you go, whether it's on your standard inspection report formats, also utilizing the TurboTrack supplementary reports as well, but document everything. Have a case for why you're doing what you're doing, moving through the course of your day. All right, so that's concluding the training session. Hopefully that has filled in a few blanks for you, given you a good understanding on how to use the device. Couple this device with your knowledge and your experience, and it'll stand you in good stead for doing quality professional termite inspections. So if there are any questions, please feel free. Turn your microphone on and ask away now, or use the chat function to put through if you'd like to. If we don't have any questions moving forward, I will thank you all very much for attending. Hopefully you got something out of it. Hopefully it wasn't a waste of your time sitting in. For those of you that do have the unit, hopefully you can utilize it and have a greater appreciation and understanding of the unit after this session. And with that, I'll bid you all farewell. Everything goes well for you. Go out there and find those termites and make it happen. All right, everyone, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.